So when we hear the word union budget, it immediately gives us all kind of scares because there are so many jargon, so many technical terms. It'll be great if you can tell our viewers on Facebook why we should care about the budget. Why, how does it affect you and me, or is it just about fiscal deficit and this deficit and that deficit? Why should we care about the budget?
Well, for the ordinary individual who I hope is a taxpayer, unfortunately in India too few people pay their taxes. So for the ordinary individual who does pay his taxes, I think the most significant part of the budget that he'll be looking forward to really is to see whether there's any change in the tax rate, effectively the tax slabs, to see whether his tax incidence, whether the total amount that he has to pay the government, because let's accept it, nobody likes to pay taxes. We all pay it unwillingly, but the honest among us pay it because we know that's our duty to the country, and if you expect services from the government, you must pay your taxes as well. So I think the first thing that everybody would look forward to would be, is there any change in the tax slab? Is there any change in the tax rate? In this particular budget, there's an additional thing that perhaps people are looking forward to, or if not looking forward to, at least waiting to see whether the finance minister will act, is on what the long-term capital gains should be. There's been a lot of controversy that the long-term capital gains on shares alone is given slightly preferential treatment, in the sense that any share which is held and sold after a year, you pay no capital gains at all on it, unlike any other form of asset, whether it's land or it's gold or anything else. And that seems very unfair, because it seems to be unfairly favoring those who invest their money in shares, and typically those who invest their money in shares are amongst the better off in this country.
Right.
So there's been
and
a lot
also
of
very small constituent.
Very small people, number of this part, both in absolute numbers as well as a share of the population, and particularly because there's been all this talk of inequality after Thomas Piketty's book. So there is a feeling that you need to kind of make it more equitable. So either start levying a higher rate of capital gains tax on shares also, or at least increase the holding period, so you pay a long-term capital gains maybe after 2 years, not after 1 year. So I think that is something that there'll be a lot of pressure also from foreign portfolio investors and from market players to say that this should not happen. But I think for the average citizen, I think this is something that is long overdue. It's been more than 10 years since we've had this preferential treatment for long-term capital gains only in shares. So I think this is something that perhaps everybody would look forward to, and particularly those who are well-heeled would want to know that whether they have to pay more tax for their long-term capital gains.
In fact, as a taxpayer, I'm really interested in the first part you said. A lot of talk about whether the exemptions will go up for the salaried class. I mean, will it go up to 2 lakhs? And what kind of relief can we expect? A few days back, we also did a story on the channel. Will the finance minister bring back standard deduction for the salaried class? So anything that we should hope for in the budget?
Well, this demand for standard deduction for salaried class has been there for a long time. It's a very justifiable demand, because unlike professionals and business people who are allowed to set up many of their expenses as business expenses, the salaried class doesn't have that ability, and many of the expenses that we incur even in our salaried jobs is in pursuance of our jobs, as it were, So there is a demand. I'm not sure whether the finance minister will accede to that demand, because past finance ministers have proved very immune to all this. But remember, this is an election budget effectively, because this is the last full budget before the elections. So yes, standard deduction could possibly be introduced, and there could also be an increase in the limit, that 1.50 that we talked about could be increased, because that limit also for savings.
And can we also expect him to do something about the ATC? Again, people think 1.5 should be...
Yeah, that is the ATC that 1.5 I was talking about. That is a demand. Then again, medical insurance, because currently medical...
It's 15,000.
Yeah, it's very, very low, given what the kind of medical expenses are. So possibly as for an ordinary taxpayer in this country, ordinary citizen of the country, tax rates, the tax slabs, then the exemption for medical expenses, standard deduction, and of course capital gains tax, if you are among the wealthy in this country, would be of interest to the ordinary taxpayer.
And tell us, when we are watching the budget speech at 11 AM, I mean, this time it's going to be different because, the whole indirect tax component is gone because of GST, so maybe he'll just talk about petroleum and, some of the other duties. What should we look forward to? What are the 4 or 5 things that will become headlines from the budget speech, that will become, headlines today and tomorrow, news channels today, newspapers tomorrow?
Well, the headline, I think, at least for a business paper, will be the fiscal deficit. But for an ordinary taxpayer or ordinary citizen, it is not of direct relevance. The only way it impacts his happiness really is that if the government's fiscal deficit, which is essentially the amount the government borrows, if that goes up, then the government will have to pay a higher rate of interest on its borrowings. Now, whenever government pays a higher rate of interest on its borrowings, anybody else who borrows will have to pay something plus what the government pays.
Right. So your
cost of borrowing will go up. So that would be a headline. It's not a direct takeaway, but that would be a headline because it affects the entire economy. It would affect the individual saver as well as the investor, because the saver would also benefit. So if you're a saver who doesn't borrow at all, you'll be quite happy because interest rates go up. But if you are like most of the younger generation today, not a saver but a huge borrower and living off credit cards,
so we should, keep our fingers crossed,
so it depends,
and hope he sticks to that 3.2% that he spoke about. And finally, ma'am, the other thing is anything that we can expect, for education, for healthcare, for sanitation. I mean, everybody's talking about rural push, but these are equally important areas that do not get attention. And the eco survey showed how pathetic we are when it comes to R&D spend as a percentage of GDP. So anything that you expect on some of these other areas?
Well, he certainly will spend more definitely on the rural area, and definitely he will spend more on education and health. But these are things that don't impact us immediately. Certainly, if more people in India are educated, then you'll find the general level of awareness in society increasing. Health, again, you'll find, hopefully there'll be greater awareness of what things like environmental pollution if the government spends more money, and that will impact us, but over the medium to longer term. Whereas tax is what hits us immediately and makes us either happy or sad. And it's usually sad because every budget does have something. Because after all, government does need revenue also. Because if you want government to do the various things that you do want it to do, then government must get revenue. Unfortunately, very few of us in this country pay tax. So I think as a taxpayer, as a citizen, we should look for the tax and hope that even if he does increase it, it doesn't increase so much that it really impacts our happiness hugely. But given, as I said, that this is an election budget, I doubt if that's going to happen. Most probably you will find an easier tax regime rather than stricter one.
Right. On that note, thank you so much for joining us on this FB Live, and you can catch Mythili ma'am, all through the day on ET Now. She is going to be in the studio to dissect the budget second by second, minute by minute. So we will also be bringing her Insta analysis for you on Twitter. Ensure you follow us on Twitter as well. And thank you so much again for joining us.